Genesis chapter 23, Loss, Legacy, and the Birth of a Heritage. Genesis chapter 23 stands apart in the biblical narrative as a chapter of transition, reflection, and the establishment of a lasting legacy. Unlike many other chapters in Genesis that recount dramatic encounters with God, wars, or divine tests, Genesis 23 presents a more intimate and human moment, the death of Sarah, the wife of Abraham, and the subsequent acquisition of a burial site for her. This chapter, while brief, carries deep theological, historical, and cultural significance. It demonstrates the importance of honoring the dead, the value of property as a means of establishing a permanent heritage, and the development of a covenantal identity that would come to define the people of Israel. The chapter begins with the account of Sarah's death at the age of 127 years. The text states, Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah, Genesis 23 verse 1. This opening verse is significant because it marks the end of an era for Abraham, whose life had been closely intertwined with the promises and blessings God had bestowed upon him. Sarah was not only his wife, but also the mother of Isaac, the child through whom God had promised to build a great nation, Genesis 17:19. The death of Sarah, therefore, is not just a personal loss for Abraham. It symbolizes the closing of a chapter in the fulfillment of God's promises to him and a moment of transition toward the future of his descendants. Abraham's response to Sarah's death is measured and respectful. Rather than mourning in a way that might seem self-centered, he immediately focuses on ensuring that his wife is properly honored. In ancient Near Eastern culture, burial practices were of great importance because they signified respect for the dead and affirmed the continuity of family and tribal identity. Abraham's desire to secure a permanent burial place for Sarah reflects his understanding of this cultural and religious obligation. He seeks to acquire a piece of land that will serve as a family burial ground, a tangible sign of the covenant and a physical legacy that would endure for generations. Abraham approaches the Hittites, the people who inhabited the land around him, and inquires about a burial site. His interaction with the Hittites is handled with politeness and dignity, reflecting his status as a foreigner living among different people. The narrative records that the Hittites were very willing to give it to him, Genesis 23 verse 6. However, Abraham insists on paying a fair price for the land, demonstrating both respect for the local customs and a desire for a legitimate, permanent acquisition. This insistence on paying for the land is significant because it establishes Abraham's integrity and sets a legal precedent for future land transactions in the biblical narrative. The negotiations between Abraham and Ephron the Hittite are described in detail. Ephron initially offers the field of Machpelah along with the cave in it as a gift to Abraham. However, Abraham refuses the gift, stating that he will pay for it so that the transaction is recorded and binding, Genesis 23:10-11. This insistence on a formal purchase not only reflects Abraham's commitment to ethical dealings, but also ensures that the land becomes an irrevocable inheritance for his descendants. The transaction is described with specificity. Abraham weighs out silver as the price, and Ephron accepts it, thereby making the cave of Machpelah his property, Genesis 23:16-20. The narrative concludes with the statement that the field and the cave in it became a possession of Abraham as a burial place. The purchase of the field of Machpelah is significant on several levels. First, it marks the beginning of the physical inheritance of the land promised by God to Abraham and his descendants, Genesis 12:7, 15:18-21. By acquiring a piece of the land through a fair and legal transaction, Abraham lays the groundwork for the future nation of Israel. The cave of Machpelah, in particular, becomes a symbol of continuity and permanence, a sacred site where future generations will be buried, and a tangible reminder of God's promises. Scholars such as John H. Walton argue that this acquisition is not merely a real estate transaction, but a foundational act that establishes the Israelite claim to the land, affirming the covenant relationship between God and Abraham's family. Second, the manner in which Abraham conducts this transaction serves as a model for integrity and justice. In choosing to pay for the land rather than accept it as a gift, Abraham ensures that the deal is legally binding and recognized by all parties involved. This action speaks to the value placed on ethical behavior in the biblical tradition. It also illustrates the principle that even in times of personal loss and hardship, maintaining honor and fairness is paramount. Scholars like Walter Brueggemann have noted that such narratives highlight the interplay between divine promises and human responsibility. While God promises to bless Abraham, it is also his duty to act righteously in all matters, including those that affect his family and future generations. Theologically, Genesis 23 raises important questions about death, mourning, and the hope of eternal life. Although the chapter focuses primarily on the practical matters of burial and property, it also hints at deeper spiritual truths. The careful and respectful treatment of Sarah's body in death underscores the biblical view that life and death are part of a larger divine plan. While Genesis 23 does not explicitly discuss resurrection or eternal life, later biblical texts build on these themes by portraying death as a temporary state before a future restoration. Hebrews 11, for example, celebrates Abraham's faith by noting that he believed God could even raise his son from the dead if necessary. Hebrews 11, verse 17 to 19. Although Sarah's death is a moment of grief, it also serves as a reminder that God's promises extend beyond the boundaries of mortal life. Another significant aspect of Genesis 23 is the way in which it sets the stage for future narratives in the Bible. The field of Machpelah eventually becomes the burial place for other key figures in the biblical tradition, including Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah. Genesis 25 of 9, 49, 29 to 32. This continuity reinforces the idea that the covenant promises made to Abraham are not limited to a single generation, but are passed down through the family line. The act of purchasing the land becomes a foundational moment that links the patriarchal narratives with the later history of Israel. Scholars like John Goldingay have emphasized that such foundational acts are critical for understanding the larger biblical narrative. They provide the physical and spiritual roots from which the nation of Israel grows. The narrative of Genesis 23 also invites readers to reflect on themes of loss and legacy in their own lives. The death of a loved one, such as Sarah's passing, is a universal experience that brings with it sorrow and grief. Yet, in the midst of loss, there can also be opportunities to honor the memory of those who have passed and to build lasting legacies that benefit future generations. Abraham's actions in securing a burial site are a poignant reminder that even in times of deep personal pain, there is the potential to create something enduring, a heritage that connects the past with the future. From a practical perspective, Genesis 23 teaches valuable lessons about the importance of fair and ethical behavior in our everyday dealings. Abraham's insistence on paying for the field, rather than accepting it as a gift, exemplifies a commitment to integrity that is relevant in all areas of life, from business transactions to personal relationships. His respectful negotiations with the Hittites illustrate the benefits of engaging with others in a manner that honors both parties, ensuring that agreements are made with mutual consent and documented for posterity. In a world where ethical lapses can have long-lasting consequences, the example set by Abraham remains a powerful model for conduct. In addition, Genesis 23 highlights the role of property in shaping identity and community. In ancient times, land was much more than a resource. It was a symbol of stability, security, and divine favor. The acquisition of the field of Machpelah by Abraham not only provided a practical solution for Sarah's burial, but also served as an enduring marker of the covenant between God and Abraham's descendants. This theme resonates with later biblical texts, where the land becomes central to the identity of Israel. For modern readers, the story underscores the importance of establishing strong foundations, whether in families, communities, or nations, that are built on principles of justice, integrity, and respect for heritage. Scholarly commentary on Genesis 23 has provided numerous insights into its meaning and significance. Walter Brueggemann emphasizes that the chapter is not merely a record of a legal transaction, but a pivotal moment in the unfolding of God's covenant with Abraham. Brueggemann notes that the careful acquisition of land symbolizes a divine act of ordering chaos, bringing stability to a world marked by uncertainty and change. Similarly, John Goldingay discusses the cultural context of the narrative, explaining how the purchase of the field served to legitimize the future claims of Abraham's descendants and established a tangible connection to the land promised by God. Another important scholarly perspective comes from John Walton, who argues that Genesis 23 should be understood as a foundational narrative that sets the stage for Israel's history. Walton contends that the careful documentation of the transaction, including the mention of specific weights of silver and detailed negotiations, is meant to underscore the seriousness of the covenant and the importance of legal and ethical dealings in maintaining that covenant. By recording these details, the text provides a model for how agreements should be conducted, reinforcing the idea that the blessings of God are intertwined with righteous and responsible behavior. The narrative in Genesis 23 also offers rich material for reflection on the human response to death and loss. The quiet dignity with which Abraham handles Sarah's death and the subsequent negotiations serves as a model for how individuals can honor those who have passed while preparing for the future. This balance between mourning and practical action is echoed in later biblical passages that emphasize both the sorrow of loss and the hope of renewal. For instance, the book of Ecclesiastes discusses the cycles of life and the importance of embracing both grief and joy as part of the human experience. In this way, Genesis 23 resonates on both a personal and communal level, offering lessons that are as applicable today as they were in ancient times. In summary, Genesis chapter 23 is a richly layered text that, while focused on a seemingly mundane transaction, carries deep theological, cultural, and ethical significance. The chapter records the death of Sarah, the beloved wife of Abraham, and the careful acquisition of the field of Machpelah as a burial site for her. This narrative serves as a foundational moment in the biblical story, establishing not only a physical claim to the land promised by God, but also a legacy of integrity, ethical behavior, and reverence for the covenant. Abraham's respectful negotiations with the Hittites and his insistence on a fair price highlight the importance of justice and honor, principles that are central to both ancient and modern understandings of community and heritage. Furthermore, Genesis 23 offers valuable insights into the human response to loss and the ways in which we build lasting legacies from moments of grief. The story reminds us that even in the face of profound sorrow, there is an opportunity to act with integrity, to honor the memory of loved ones, and to establish foundations that will support future generations. The chapter's emphasis on ethical behavior, legal legitimacy, and the sacred nature of inheritance provides timeless lessons for anyone seeking to navigate the complexities of life with faith and honor. Supported by biblical references, Genesis 23, 1-20, and scholarly insights from figures such as Walter Brueggemann, John Goldingay, and John Walton, Genesis chapter 23 continues to inspire and instruct readers. It challenges us to consider the value of our own legacies, the importance of treating others with fairness and respect, and the ways in which our actions can create a lasting impact that honors both our heritage and our commitments to higher ideals. By studying this chapter, believers are encouraged to build their lives on a foundation of integrity and faith, confident that the blessings promised by God will endure through generations. Genesis chapter 23 is not merely a historical account of Sarah's death and a land purchase. It is a narrative rich with meaning about loss, legacy, and the establishment of a covenant identity. The story teaches that in times of sorrow, the choices we make can create enduring symbols of hope and continuity. Abraham's respectful and ethical handling of Sarah's burial arrangements serves as a timeless example of how to honor the past while preparing a secure future. For modern readers, the chapter offers both comfort in the face of loss and a call to act with integrity, ensuring that our personal and communal legacies reflect the goodness and justice of God's promises.